you've done it again. Reached for your phone before your eyes were even fully open, scrolled through nothing in particular, and put it down 20 minutes later without remembering deciding to pick it up in the first place. That's not a failure of willpower. That's a loop running exactly as it was built to run, completely without your permission. And understanding how that loop actually works turns out to be one of the most useful things a person can learn about themselves. That loop is the subject of The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, a journalist who spent years digging through neuroscience research, corporate case studies, and personal stories to answer a deceptively simple question. Why do certain behaviors become automatic? And once they do, how do you actually change them? Duhigg's answer wasn't a list of willpower tricks. It was something closer to an engineering diagram of the human brain's habit-forming machinery. And once you see the diagram, you start noticing it running underneath nearly everything you do without thinking. This book has stuck with readers for over a decade because it doesn't just describe habits. It hands you the actual mechanism, and a mechanism, unlike a vague piece of motivational advice, can be taken apart and rebuilt. The foundation of the entire book is a simple 3-part structure Duhigg calls the habit loop. And once you learn to see it, you can't stop seeing it everywhere. Every habit, no matter how complex it looks from the outside, runs on the same basic architecture. First, a cue, some trigger in your environment that tells your brain which automatic behavior to run. Then a routine, the actual behavior itself, the part most people think of when they think of a habit. And finally, a reward, some payoff, however small, that tells your brain this loop was worth repeating, which is what causes the whole sequence to get wired in more deeply the next time the same cue appears. Watch this play out in something as mundane as an afternoon slump at the office, the kind almost everyone recognizes without needing it explained. The cue might be a specific feeling of mental fatigue around 3 o'clock. The routine is walking to the break room for a snack. The reward isn't really the snack itself. It's often a few minutes of social conversation with whoever else happens to be there, or simply a break from staring at a screen. Someone trying to eat healthier by willing themselves not to get the snack is fighting the wrong part of the loop entirely, because the actual craving driving the whole sequence was never about food. It was about the break, the conversation, the momentary escape. Miss that, and you can white-knuckle your way through avoiding the vending machine for exactly as long as your willpower holds out, which for most people, by 3 in the afternoon, isn't very long at all. This leads directly into one of the book's sharper insights, the piece most people skip over when they try to change a habit and then wonder why it didn't stick. It's not really the routine your brain is craving, it's the reward, and more specifically, the anticipation of that reward, which starts firing in your brain the moment the cue appears, well before the routine has even begun. This craving is the actual engine driving the entire loop, and it's why habits feel involuntary, even when you consciously want to stop them. Your brain isn't asking permission. It already expects the payoff, and that expectation creates a kind of internal pressure that builds until it's relieved. This is why the single most reliable method for changing a habit, according to Duhigg's research, isn't trying to eliminate the loop entirely. It's keeping the same cue and the same reward, and swapping out only the routine in between. Someone whose stress cue reliably triggers a cigarette isn't really craving nicotine in some pure, isolated sense. They're craving the brief pause, the physical ritual, the moment of stepping outside and away from whatever triggered the stress. Replace the cigarette with a 2-minute walk around the block at the exact same trigger point, and you can often satisfy the same underlying craving without the routine that was doing the actual damage. The cue stays. The reward roughly stays. Only the middle step changes. This is a far more workable strategy than trying to erase the craving altogether, because cravings, once wired in, rarely disappear just because you've decided they should. From here, Duhigg introduces an idea with implications that stretch well beyond any single habit. Some habits matter far more than others, not because of their own direct impact, but because of what they trigger downstream. He calls these keystone habits, and the research behind them is almost counterintuitive. Changing one specific, sometimes unremarkable habit can set off a cascade of unrelated improvements elsewhere in a person's life, seemingly out of proportion to the habit itself. Consider something as simple as making your bed every morning. On its own, this changes almost nothing measurable, but people who build this single habit consistently often report better focus at work, improved budgeting, and stronger relationships. Not because the tidy bed causes any of those things directly, but because the small, completed act of discipline first thing in the morning seems to build a kind of momentum, a felt sense of, I am someone who follows through, that quietly carries into other decisions throughout the day. Exercise functions this way for a huge number of people too. Someone who commits to a regular morning workout often finds themselves eating better and sleeping more consistently without ever directly targeting either of those things, simply because the identity shift triggered by one disciplined habit seems to leak outward into everything nearby. The lesson isn't that every habit deserves equal effort. It's that identifying the one or two keystone habits already present in your life, or deliberately building one, can be far more efficient than trying to overhaul a dozen behaviors simultaneously. That idea of a felt identity shift connects to something Duhigg treats as genuinely essential, not optional, for habits that are meant to survive real stress, belief, and specifically, the sense that change is actually possible, reinforced by something outside your own head. His research repeatedly found that people who successfully changed deep, difficult habits, especially ones tied to addiction, rarely did it through private willpower alone. They needed to believe change was achievable, and that belief tended to form far more reliably inside a community of some kind, a group of people who had faced the same struggle and could visibly demonstrate that the other side of it actually existed. Think about the difference between someone trying to quit drinking entirely alone, relying purely on private resolve, and someone doing it inside a support group where they're surrounded by people who've been exactly where they are and came out the other side. The private version isn't impossible, but it's fragile because private willpower has no reinforcement when it wavers at 2 a.m. on a hard night. The group version has something sturdier underneath it. Other people modeling the belief that this is survivable, which turns out to matter enormously when a person's own belief in themselves is running low. Duhigg's point isn't that willpower is irrelevant. It's that willpower alone is a thin foundation for the hardest habits, and belief, especially belief borrowed temporarily from a community until it becomes your own, tends to hold up under pressure in a way solitary determination often doesn't, particularly on the specific nights when it matters most. Willpower itself gets a closer look in the book too, and the finding here reshapes how most people think about self-control entirely, often in ways that feel like a relief the first time you actually hear them stated plainly. Willpower isn't a fixed personality trait some people simply have more of, the way height or eye color is fixed. It behaves more like a muscle, trainable over time, but also genuinely depletable within a single day, weaker after it's been used repeatedly on unrelated tasks. This is why the same person who resists dessert admirably at lunch after a demanding, decision-heavy morning often finds themselves unable to resist it at dinner, not because their commitment evaporated, but because the reservoir was already drained by dozens of smaller decisions made throughout the day that had nothing to do with food at all. Picture someone navigating a genuinely difficult day at work, full of tense conversations and constant small decisions, who then comes home and snaps at their family over something minor, completely out of proportion to what actually happened, leaving everyone confused about where the sudden edge in their voice even came from. That's rarely a character failure showing up out of nowhere. It's often willpower running on empty by evening, after being spent all day on things that looked, individually, unrelated to patients at home. Duhigg's research suggests that willpower, treated like the exhaustible resource it actually is, can be managed rather than simply demanded of yourself indefinitely, front-loading the hardest self-control tasks earlier in the day when the reservoir is fuller, rather than assuming the same discipline will be equally available at 10 at night. There's one more piece Duhigg builds into the habit change process itself, separate from the loop's mechanics, that explains why some change efforts gain real momentum while others stall out almost immediately. The deliberate use of small wins. Large goals stated in their full size tend to feel abstract and slightly overwhelming, which makes them easy to postpone. Small wins work differently. They're modest enough to actually achieve quickly, but they produce a real, measurable psychological effect, generating a genuine sense of capability that makes the next slightly harder step feel more reachable than it would have otherwise. Consider someone trying to get their finances under control after years of avoidance. The full goal, framed honestly, is enormous and vague enough to trigger avoidance all over again, but successfully canceling one unused subscription this week is small enough to actually finish, and finishing it produces a real, if modest, sense of progress. That small, completed action tends to make the next one, opening a savings account, slightly easier to start. Not because the money changed, but because the person's internal sense of, "I can actually do this," grew a little with each completed step. Duhigg's research found this pattern repeatedly in successful organizational change too, not just personal habits. Large transformations that stuck almost always traced back to an early sequence of small, visible wins, deliberately sequenced to build momentum, rather than one dramatic overhaul attempted all at once. The last major thread worth pulling connects individual habits to something larger because Duhigg's research didn't stop at personal behavior. He found the exact same loop structure driving habits inside entire organizations, sometimes with consequences far beyond any one person's daily routine. A company's culture in this framing isn't really a vague set of values written on a wall somewhere. It's a set of institutional habits, cues, and routines and rewards baked into how decisions actually get made, often invisible to the people operating inside them every day. Picture two companies facing an identical customer complaint. In one, the organizational habit, built over years of small precedents, is to quietly smooth over the complaint and avoid escalating anything that might look bad internally. In the other, the ingrained habit is to surface problems immediately and loudly because past experience has taught employees that raising a flag early gets rewarded rather than punished. Neither company wrote these responses into an official policy document. They emerged, habit by habit, decision by decision, until they became simply how things are done here. Duhigg's point is that changing an organization's culture, much like changing a personal habit, usually isn't about a single dramatic announcement from leadership. It's about identifying and deliberately rebuilding the specific cues and rewards that have quietly trained everyone's behavior over time, often without anyone consciously designing them that way in the first place. Every one of these threads taken together points toward the same underlying reassurance hiding inside what could otherwise feel like a fairly mechanical, even deterministic view of human behavior. Habits feel like fixed parts of your character, but they're closer to loops your brain built through repetition. And loops built through repetition can be identified, studied, and deliberately rebuilt. The cue that sends you reaching for your phone, the craving underneath a stress-driven snack, the keystone habit quietly holding together a dozen other good behaviors, the depleted willpower behind an unfair moment of anger. None of it is random, and none of it is permanently fixed either. Maybe the most useful thing this book leaves behind isn't a specific habit to adopt. It's a way of watching your own behavior a little more closely, noticing the cue before the routine even starts, catching the craving before it fully takes hold, and realizing that the loop you've been running on autopilot for years was never actually unchangeable. It was just unexamined.